In the last episode, we left off where I was fitting the fuel tanks to mark the mounting blocks for drilling. And I mentioned in that episode that I may be doing a little bit of fiberglass tabbing work on those blocks, and that I would need to repair and replace the block that I had to remove. This is the block that I had to remove in order to get the tank in. I have marked it. It's the black spot. But in order to get it out without totally removing the tank, which I didn't want to do at the time, I had to cut it with my fine tool, which I did. It's kind of got a nice curve to it. But with the fine tool, I was able to get from this side and the top, but not from the bottom and from the back side. So I stuffed a screwdriver into the slot that I cut with the fine tool and then pried it out, which of course broke it. But that's not a big deal because epoxy is magic. So I'm going to epoxy this back together right now, and that will take care of that until the tank is in. The next time I put the tanks in will be the last time I put them in. I'm going to put them in and hook them up and bolt them down nice and secure, and this will be the last piece, but I want this piece to be ready. So my first task today is to epoxy this, and then I'm going to open up the cockpit and we'll do some fiberglass tabbing work on the blocks that are in there. And once that's done, I am going to prep the fuel holes for painting. I've been saying that repeatedly now for a few episodes, but the time has come to actually get it done. Every time I come to the boat, we move it just a little bit forward in terms of project completion, and we're finally to the place where we can get the painting done, at least once the fiberglass work is done. So in order to effect that, I bought one clamp that block, and I bought some fiberglass cloth to do the tabbing with. The only thing left to do is to get busy. So I've mixed up my epoxy in this little cup, and I thought I'd mention, if you are doing a lot of this kind of work and you're getting your mixing cups from a marine store, they'll charge you $3 or $4 per cup, which is ridiculous. I went down to the local dollar store and I picked up 8 of these for $2.50. The only difference being is the ones from the marine store have markings on them for volume, which I don't need. I've got the pumps that come with the system, so it's equal number of pumps and you're good to go. I also thought I would mention that the temperature out here is extremely warm, at least for us here. When I was putting the tanks in, it was about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure what that is in Celsius, but probably about 31, 32, something like that, which is extremely warm. And down below, there's no breeze. Right up where I'm sitting right now, I can actually feel a breeze, which is nice. But down below, it's just dead calm. And so I was dehydrating from sweating out. And I was also bent double trying to lift those tanks into place. They weigh about, I would guess, about 60, 65 pounds a piece. And they're big, so they're awkward to move. So it was a very difficult day doing that. Today I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to open up the cockpit and get in there and do some fiberglassing and some sanding and stuff. So it should be a relatively easy day, but it's still pretty warm out. I don't know if you can see, I'm already sweating, and all I've done is mix up epoxy. But I'm not going to take my t-shirt off because when I put the tanks in, I was basically bent over all day with the sun beating down on my back. And yes, I got sunburned because I'm smart that way. So, onward and upward. Let's get this done. There's a trick to gluing wood together like this. When you clamp it, as I've just done, you don't want to clamp it down really tight, because then you remove all the epoxy. You see the squeeze out? That's a significant amount of squeeze out. I'm not gonna waste it. I'm gonna put it back, and then there's some holes down below I want to fill. But you have to be careful that you don't squeeze out all the epoxy, because it weakens the join. It's the epoxy that's holding the wood together. So if you squeeze it all out, there's nothing holding the wood together, which is kind of counterproductive. So just a little bit of a squeeze, hold it in place. Let that cure up, and it should be good. One of the benefits of opening up the cockpit hatch on a regular basis to work, get in and out, is that I'm getting pretty good at removing the hatch. That thing weighs about 50 pounds, and it's kind of awkward to get out because of all the hardware in the cockpit. But I've kind of got a system down now. I can lift it out and put it back in without hardly any problem at all. So that's good. All right, so now I'm going to take my take the epoxy and fill a bunch of holes down below. Alright, so I've got some minor screw holes and imperfections filled in with epoxy. Want to have a look? Come see. So here and up there and on this side. Those are all holes made by previous owners mounting bits of hardware and then removing them. Some of the hardware I've removed because it was no longer necessary, but it leaves unsightly holes and gashes and whatnot. So I think that leaving those unrepaired leaves the boat in a state where it looks like the owner doesn't really give a rip about it, and that's not the impression I want to give when someone has a look into my engine compartment. I want it to look neat and clean and tidy, like somebody actually gives a rip, and I do. So we'll get those plugged and sanded and faired, and when it's painted it'll look all pristine again. So now I'm just going to do a little bit of vacuuming, and I'll start the prep work on the fiberglass, the bare fiberglass against the hull here. Progress. Let the fun begin. First step in the process is to cut the fiberglass into suitable sized pieces to wrap around the wood blocks. I won't be doing this one because, as I mentioned before, I will be epoxying the chunk I took off back on it once the tank is in. So I'm going to start with the top and the forward two, and then I will move on to the starboard side here. This block here I did a little bit more surgery on. I thought it'd be probably less frustrating and problematic to cut the edges off it now to allow the tank to get in here while the tank's out than to do it when I'm trying to put the thing back in again. And besides, I want to cover it in fiberglass. So let's begin. Successful day, moving in the right direction, getting things done. Today's challenge was the temperature. The epoxy mix that I was doing, just straight epoxy with slow hardener, was kicking off fairly quickly. I managed to get the tabbing on those blocks in, but it wasn't a super spiffy job, simply because the consistency of the epoxy just got thicker and thicker really quick, and it's hard to move epoxy through the cloth when it's that thick. So I've done one layer for each block, and I'll probably come back at it tomorrow or day after or something and do another layer. I just like to do things right. But I'm going to have to, once the stuff is hardened properly, I'm going to have to sand it down. There's a lot of unfinished edges that are sticking proud, so they'll be hard as a rock and like little needles sticking out. So I'll have to sand those down and sand the tabs that I've already got in there. It won't take too long. I've got the fine tool, which will take care of that pretty quickly and readily. And then I will add more. I'm pleased with my decision to go with the fiberglass. I don't know that it's going to add that much strength or protection to the mounting blocks, but I just think it's a good idea. So I'm glad I did that. As always, fair winds, following seas. God bless.